Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two musicians who used to play in a band together and share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. If you haven't seen the movie we're talking about, then don't worry. The first half of the episode will be pretty high level and spoiler free, and then we'll play a warning before we start talking about any major plot twists in the ending. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So, we're back. This week we're continuing our series about the Netflix series, The Haunting of Hill House, and this is a new thing for us.
Very new thing, but I like it.
I do too. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And normally we review one horror movie each week, but we wanted to spice things up a little bit. It's kind of like when you've been married for a long time and you're in a rut. It's a happy rut.
Yeah.
But it's still good for you both to change things up a little bit once in a while, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Do something a little different. Introduce
the whips and chains.
I was going to say maybe try a new recipe, but to each their own.
That's the same thing.
Yeah. Anyway, we decided that we would do a multi-week series where we're reviewing a TV show that a lot of people had recommended to us, and that's The Haunting of Hill House. And this week we're going to be talking about episodes 3 and 4. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode, it would probably be good to go back and do that and listen to the review of episodes 1 and 2. We will be referring to a lot of stuff from those episodes this week as well, but we haven't watched episodes 5 and 6 yet, so this week is going to be focused on 3 and 4, with probably some spoilers from 1 and 2 mixed in. So if we ruin anything for you, you can't say that I didn't warn you, and here we go.
All right.
So before we get too far into it, I think it's important to talk about with these two episodes, they felt different than the first two in that they each focused very closely on one character.
Yeah, I agree. I think they kind of touched base on that with like the second episode, like realizing that what they were kind of doing. I mean, the first one definitely seemed like it was a little bit more Steven.
Yeah.
And the second one was Shirley, and now, we have these two, and I'm curious on if it's going to be like who it's going to go on to next.
Yeah, and also, what do they do when they run out of characters? There's only 5 siblings and there's 10 episodes, so how long does this format hold up? I
was thinking 5 siblings, 2 parents, and those 2 people who...
the 2 people that work there? Yeah.
But still, that's, 8. So, or 9.
Math is hard. Yeah. But I thought it was interesting because the first 2, it was a lot of setup. And it was a lot of introducing characters and ideas and story arcs and mysteries and things, whereas it feels like we've kind of got that, at least the basic framework of the story sorted out at this point, and now they're going back and filling it in from different characters' perspectives.
Yeah.
So, episode 3 was all about Theo, and episode 4 was all about Luke. And they gave a lot of character development to those characters, but also did a lot of filling in and giving more information about what happened in the house. So, curious to see how it continues to play out through the series, but that's just a good thing to keep in mind as we start talking about these episodes, is we're going to talk about Theo and Luke a lot this week, because that's who the episode's focused on.
Right, yeah. Okay,
so it's going to get pretty spoilery from here, so let's play the warning, and then we'll get to the summary and what we learned.
All right.
Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. If it's not obvious enough. Warning, spoilers.
So here we go with the summary. Like I mentioned, episode 3 was all about Theo, and you learn a lot about her in both the past and the present. In the 1992 flashbacks, you learn that as a child living in Hill House, she became aware that she had a special gift and was able to tap into extra information about people and objects by touching them, which is why she started wearing the gloves. She talks to her mom about it and finds out that both her mom and her grandma had the same gift. In the A Few Years Ago flashback, you find out that she took money from Steven that he made off of his book about Hill House and used it to go back to school and get her PhD. In the present day, you find out that she got her PhD in psychology and is using her special gifts to help troubled kids. Later in the episode, she visits the funeral home and touches Nell's corpse, sees something, and then falls to the ground screaming. At the very end of the episode, you see a flashback to the night that the dad left Hill House with the kids, and you get a little bit more information about what went on. Episode 4 is all about Luke. Rather than focusing on the past, the episode took place mostly in the present. In the flashbacks, you mostly see Luke interacting with Nell. You find out that they're twins and that they've always shared a special connection. You also see him interacting with Abigail, who he has mentioned more than once that his parents don't believe in. You also see him witnessing a tall ghost in the house who wears a bowler hat and a trench coat and hovers above the floor. In the present, you see Luke in rehab. He has a close friend who runs away, and so he leaves as well to try and track her down and convince her to come back. He runs into a lot of challenges along the way, and each time something goes wrong, he sees what appears to be the same ghost in the bowler hat that haunted him as a child. In the end, he learns about Nell's suicide and adamantly denies that she killed herself.
Very good. I liked it.
So yeah, I take it you did some reading about this series, or maybe about these episodes?
I did.
What'd you learn?
So, since it's after the spoiler warning, I'm going to have a little bit of fun with this. I found a website. I'm going to tell you what happens on the very end, last episode. Just kidding. I have... So, we found a website that actually has... It lists out all the ghost sightings in the episodes.
Interesting.
So, like, one thing we kind of talked about, like, in the first episode was, like felt like they were constantly being watched or something, you know, just felt like there's probably something in the background, but you couldn't really tell.
Yeah.
Well, I found a website, which we'll link, but it explains or points out all the ghost sightings, which are usually kind of minor, but there's like 4 or 5 an episode, which I thought was kind of interesting. So there's 9 sightings, there's 9 ghost sightings in episode 3, Theo's episode.
Yeah.
And so, let's see, let me just point out some of the main ones. So, in episode 3, Theo goes and she's talking with her mom, and she's figuring out, like that's when they're talking about getting, you know, inheriting the powers and all that. If you look at the background there's a ghost, like, reflection kind of in the glass.
I missed that.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll actually just post it. My favorite one, though, was episode 4, when the twins are playing with, like, that...
Like the intercom
thing. So when they're downstairs, like, Luke has his little hat on and the button comes down. If you look on the opposite side of the room, there's like a glass door or like a glass cabinet, and there's like a reflection of a ghost in that, and the ghost actually sticks its hand up on the glass. The ghost is kind of like watching them, and then like has, you know, puts his hand up on the glass too. But it, like, they're all so subtle. Like,
yes,
you're looking down a hallway, or you're looking at a conversation that's going on the left side of the screen. The right side, you know, shows the hallway, and it looks kind of like a lamp or something, but if you look closer, it's actually like a blonde-headed woman standing way back there. So there's just a ton of ghosts that we kind of spoke about, but I'm gonna attach that, you know, for these episodes too. I might just put them in the description.
That's cool. That's a really good find. I had noticed a few, but definitely if there were, just based on the 2 that you just said, they caught some that I didn't, so I'll be very excited to see that.
Yeah, see, I didn't notice them. Like, I had to, we found this after I watched the episodes, and we went back to the specific, because the website has like screenshots.
Oh, nice. And
so we went back so I could try to catch them, and some of them are still pretty hard to see, but yeah, anyway, I thought it was kind of fun. I mean, a lot of them also are just like in passing, like young Theo's walking through the house, and real quick behind a door there's like a man standing there, but I mean, it's like all tiny and kind of
very subtle. Yeah.
It's almost like with the filming technique that they use, they focused so it's really clear on the actress or actor, and the background's a little bit more blurry, so it they can hide those things in. You know.
Yeah. Well, and that
subtle.
Kind of goes back to what we talked about last week with just the idea that this is a really dense series that it has a lot of replay value.
Yeah, exactly. And, it made it kind of fun, too. And I'm only reading about the episodes that we watched because I wanted to try to catch them the next. And I think it also kind of adds to the scary aspect once you realize that and you're trying to watch and you're trying to catch something, because then all of a sudden something will pop up that's right in front of your face and you may or may not kind of go, whoo.
Yeah. Well, cool. Good stuff. And just for anybody that's listening, we put those, when we talk about linking to something or adding it to the description, in the podcast, in whatever app you have, you should be able to look at show notes for the episode. And that's where we put a description, and it has a link generally to all of our Facebook and email address and stuff. But also, when we talk about music, we'll put links to the songs that we talk about, or if we talk about a website or a video, we'll put links in there as well. So,
yep. Also, I'll put it on Facebook.
Oh, yeah. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Cool. So, yeah, this, in general, I thought that these two episodes had kind of the same pattern as the first two. The first one, episode 3, did a great job of weaving in, the past, present, and, the creepy stuff, and it had really good storytelling, and it was really engaging, and had me on the edge of my seat the whole time, kind of like the first episode did. But then, episode 4 was Luke's episode, and it seemed like it was a lot more drama and present-day stuff, and a lot less supernatural weaved in. And so I kind of had a harder time paying attention to it. Mm-hmm. So do you think that this pattern is going to continue? Do you think it's deliberate that in some episodes they have a lot more of the supernatural activity and kind of the horror type stuff, and some are a little bit more drama, character development?
Yeah, I mean, because it was like that with the first episode. It was, seemed more, ghost horror. The second one seemed a little bit more drama. I mean, it's added in to each episode, but it's just, it seems like every other episode there's more and more. So I think I think what it'll do is it'll come back, the series will come back and touch base on Luke, his hauntings, because he's always talking about his imaginary friend, and so I think that it'll come back, but it also had to explain where he's been the past 3 episodes. Yeah. So, yeah, it was definitely episode 4 was a little bit harder to watch, like you said, than 3. I mean,
well, and I feel like it didn't give as much of filling in kind of some of the larger mysteries of the show. Yeah. So, what happened that night when everybody left, and what happened to Nell when she went back to the house in the present, and kind of some of those things that are the big questions that are hanging over everything.
Yeah,
I feel like every other episode doesn't address those as much, which really keeps you wanting more. So I see that it's kind of strategically, a good idea.
Yeah, it was definitely a smart move.
But yeah, and I do think that episode 4, and we'll get into this more when we get into the scenes, but in episode 4 there is one really big kind of new mystery that's been opened up that will be interesting to see how it plays out. So yeah. So did you have specific scenes or things that stood out to you as particularly good or bad or interesting or worth talking about?
Oh man, I had a couple things that leading into the scenes that are leading into it was, I do have to say I still enjoy the whole, when they're filming, turning a light off or turning a light on, turning a light off, and it flips to a different, it flips to the past. So you hit the light switch and
the scene changes.
Scene changes.
Yes, episode 3 was on point with that.
It was, opening doors, and they would shut a door and the other door, another door would open at the same time, and it would go to the past. It was that scene change was like on point for sure.
Yeah.
Episode 3 for sure. I think there was like a couple in episode 4 that I noticed that I really really enjoyed too. But like that's just smart. We talked about that for sure, but I like that they kept it going for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think it really helps too. Just kind of helps you like orient yourself, because when you see that like that overlap and like the background changes, you know that the series has already established that it's like signaling you that you're in a different time. Right. So it helps like signal to you sort of how to orient yourself as you watch the episode. And episode 3, it did that a ton. So it was helpful to have that kind of continuity throughout it. Yeah,
I mean, help with that. I mean, they're doing a really good job with the explaining of the, of which time frame it is, because like a couple times they'll say like 2 days before or, or whatever. So they're helping out the viewers with, so you kind of sets the stage so like what they're going through. And I don't know if they'll have to continue doing it, because in episode 3 you kind of picked up like, oh, okay, so this is going to be her experience before Nell died. And
and it wasn't saying like 1992 anymore on the flashbacks. It was like, okay, you've got this figured out. Well, we can move forward with it.
Same time zone. So so some of the scenes that I really enjoyed was, one of them specifically was when you really got to see Theo use her power or her gift.
Yes.
Whatever you want to call it. So Theo is a child therapist, I guess, and she has a child come in and talks about a guy named Mr. Smiley. Long story short, she ends up going to the basement of the child, and she's just feeling around. She has to take her gloves off, because skin on skin contact.
It's like physical touch is the key to whatever her power is.
And so she's going around the basement and she's feeling like clothing and feeling all that, and like then she feels the couch and then like kind of lays on it and basically kind of goes through what that child who she was helping had to go through. And I mean, that was just a really intense scene. All the way down to like catching the foster dad, who was doing bad things to her. That was crazy. But
so part of that kind of storyline is there's one part where after she's met with the kid and the kid talked about Mr. Smiley, and then she's kind of, it's like stuck in her head, and she's in bed at night, and then you see the covers start being slowly pulled back. And then she sits up, and there's like that jump scare of like the Mr. Smiley at the end of her bed.
Right.
That was so good and so like unexpected when it happened, because so much of the series is so subtle, right? Like it's a lot of, kind of like you were talking about before, the ghosts in the background or something that you only half see happening. And that was so like direct and in your face. I feel like that was one of the best horror scenes of the series so far.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. I mean, even after that jump scene with Mr. Smiley at the foot of her bed, then you had like it cuts to a shot of outside and like her sister Shirley standing there, and you wonder if something weird's going on with that. I mean, you find it was the time that all the siblings are waking up. When Nell. I guess it's when Nell passed away. I mean, it's 12:03 or 3:03, depending on time zone. Anyway, so I really like that. There were, let's see, in episode 3, I liked when Luke and Nell were playing, what's that thing called again?
Like the intercom. It was like an old school, like a non-electronic one. So it was almost looked like it had like the horn of a trumpet at each end. And so you would talk through it and the people in the other room could hear you.
Yeah, so they were throwing rolling buttons down that, so the buttons were coming down, and they rolled down 3, only 2 came out. Nell comes down to figure out what's going on, and all of a sudden, they hear the creepy talking. Another button comes out, and then if you look in the reflection of the trumpet in whatever that is, you see the old lady, her face there, like that was.
I actually
creepy.
rewound the episode to rewatch that because I was like, "Did I actually just see that?"
yeah, that was super creepy. Let's see, so.
Well, and it had a lot of like the good, like creepy, scary stuff, but I really liked too sort of the backstory that it filled in, and this wasn't even. So, like they have the flashback to 2012 when they're talking about Stephen's book, and like obviously Shirley's very upset, and Theo says something about how everyone like had a different explanation for what happened, like how Shirley and Stephen were like the skeptics who were trying to say it was all just like mass hysteria, but then she also talked about like Luke and Nell's ghost stories, and kind of established herself like in the middle of the two, and so I thought that was an interesting way of sort of like dividing up the different viewpoints and also explaining why Stephen claimed to have never had like the supernatural experience and stuff in the previous one. So I thought that was like an example of really good filling in the backstory, but not like overdoing it to the point that there wasn't also lots of like horror in the episode.
Yeah, specifically it has to be tied to the fact that Theo can feel, I don't know if she can see what they saw or what becomes of them or what, but like I feel like they need to definitely explain further the feeling that she gets. But you also kind of pick up in the episode that maybe in episode 4 that the younger sister had it as well, so she had something like it too, and they kind of play it off that it's a twin thing, but like she's able to feel.
Oh well, Nell and Luke definitely have like that,
right?
Some
their
kind of
connection,
yeah.
But it makes you wonder if it's tied to, like, I was wondering if it was tied to all the girls in the family.
Interesting.
She made the comment a couple times, like I'm just curious on where that's going to go, but like I can feel it because he feels it, or he really saw it or whatever. But another scene that I absolutely enjoyed was when Theo sent Luke down in the dumbwaiter.
Yeah, that was really good.
That was extremely horror style scene. He goes down instead of coming up. The dumbwaiter won't go back up. Luke is downstairs with the flashlight, and all of a sudden you see the hand come out across the room. It's like a dark, grimy basement kind of thing. Yeah. The hand comes out, and the zombie looking thing. I don't know what it was, but so I really enjoyed that, and that also helped explain Theo's powers, because she was able to tell by touching him that he was telling the truth. And then she found, so that it was a basement that they were saying that they didn't exist, but she found the entrance to it, and for some reason they're saying it wasn't in the blueprints, even though the dumbwaiter went down to the basement.
Yeah.
And it was like, what?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Weird. Well, and I thought that everything in building out the explanation of her power, and like that scene where she's talking to her mom about it, and then the mom gives her the gloves, it really stood out to me that her relationship with her mom was really different than Shirley's. Yeah. Because in the second episode, Shirley and the mom seem to have no chemistry at all. I mean, they just seem to be very like cold and distant, whereas you kind of saw a different side of the mom. Yeah. In her interactions with Theo, she seemed a lot more like compassionate and warm, and so I'm interested to see kind of what the take is from the other kids, because I think the mystery around the mom is growing as like the central sort of plot point of the whole show. Yeah. So there were a couple of other things that I wanted to ask about, because I feel like they asked questions but didn't provide answers. So towards the end of the episode, Theo takes off her gloves and touches Nell's corpse in the bottom of the funeral home, and then just like collapses screaming. Right. I'm very curious to see what she saw. Yes, I am absolutely curious. And it was definitely a cliffhanger ending. Yeah. Like that was really interesting to me, because I think that another of the sort of central mysteries of the show is what happened to Nell, and I'm curious to know when we're going to get more information on that. So that was kind of almost like a punt.
Yeah.
Because they hooked you and made you more interested in it, but provided absolutely no information. Whereas on the other side, where you did get a little bit more information, was the flashback to the last night in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see the dad grabs Theo's arm and tells her to take Luke and Nell to the car. And when he grabs her, she sees a flash of like lots of really scary, random looking stuff.
Yeah.
And starts screaming, "Don't touch me." And so it's almost like she doesn't see the dad in like a positive light.
Right.
Whereas, what we've seen before, it kind of seemed like, at the time at least, Stephen did. So it's almost like an inverse of the relationships with the parents. So that just adds another layer of complexity on what really happened that night. And doesn't give you a lot of information. You didn't have a concrete reason to suspect the dad before, but now you kind of do. Yeah,
it was, in the first episode, it almost looks like he's the hero. He's picking up Steven and he's running out the house with him. And then also, Theo saying to Steven, like, you were asleep for like 99% of it, or whatever that percentage was, which was one of her frustrations on writing the book. Writing the book on it. But yeah, I think it seems like almost like it's going to be twisting, where it makes you wonder if like the dad was the one who actually went crazy. And I don't know. There's just so many questions that this is opening up that I think is pretty interesting.
But I do like that they gave you a little bit more information about it. And they kind of gave a different perspective on it too.
Right. Yeah, I hope that that's the way that they go. Each episode they at least tell you more and more and more. Obviously it'll come to an end, but it's definitely interesting the way that they're going upon it, and I'm not complaining about it whatsoever.
I've got another question for you.
Oh, okay.
So there's a quick exchange between Theo after she's been to the funeral home and when she touched Nell's body, where she's talking to Shirley's husband and tells her about having that Shirley found the checkbook, and she's like, well, or he asks, what do I tell her? And she said something along the lines of, make something up, another family, or that you're planning on leaving, or something that would like make her less mad than what it really is. Do you have any theories as to what the story is there?
Yeah, I think he took money from Steven.
That's a great.
That's just my guess.
I bet you're absolutely right.
And he funded some thing for her. But I think that's probably it. That's
a great call. Yeah.
It's also kind of frustrating coming from the banking industry, because you're like, you don't have to have those checks. Like those are almost becoming a thing of the past. You don't need them. Mm-hmm. Like you're just going to get caught.
Yep.
Why have them? But I think that's my guess.
Yeah. Good call. So the last scene that I wanted to talk about from from episode 3 was the opening scene. So you see a young Theo asleep in bed, and an arm reaches around her, and she thinks that it's Nell, and she's like talking to her, but then it's like holding her hand, and then it's squeezing really tight.
Yeah.
And then she rolls over and there's no one there. But you definitely saw the arm. Mm-hmm. And I think that was kind of the first time that the series gave like concrete evidence about someone that wasn't Nell being like directly haunted in the house. But my question for you is, do you think that she gained her power when that thing was grabbing her hand? Like, was that the beginning of it? Because it seemed like there was a big focus on that, and then she was looking at her hands a lot afterwards.
That could be. That's a good question. That makes sense. I mean, they said that it was inherited, so who knows? Yeah, maybe her,
or maybe it like activated it or something.
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah, for sure.
But that was just such a. I thought it was a great opening scene because it was insanely creepy.
Yeah,
and really just well pulled off. But I'm kind of curious how it fits into the larger story, and I wonder if maybe that it had some tie to her at least becoming aware of sort of that power.
Yeah, I bet so.
So.
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet. I didn't think about it.
Okay, well, cool. You want to move on to episode 4? I have a lot fewer notes for this one.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, so episode 4, like we mentioned before, it felt a little bit slower. I felt like there were fewer flashbacks, so that scene changes weren't like as noticeable just because they didn't happen as much. But I really feel like this Abigail thing is significant. It came up several times, and Sarah is super into the show, so we actually rewatched both episodes because I told her we couldn't watch the next 2 yet. But I noticed Abigail gets mentioned a ton, and it's just in passing a lot. But at the beginning of episode 4, Luke was sitting out in the past, in one of the flashbacks with her, like on a picnic blanket, and you see she's actually there. But he mentions over and over that like his parents don't believe him about her. So that's something that I think is going to have a lot more significance as the show moves forward.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be. I mean, and I think that was tied in one of the episodes where like Luke's going outside to go play with Abigail. But yeah, I definitely want to know who she is.
Yeah,
for sure. Where she come from? Why, if Nell like knew her at all, or what? But yeah.
And so then I also really liked that they showed the other side of Luke and Steven's interaction from the end of the first episode.
Yeah.
They gave more backstory to it, and they showed that there was a lot more going on than you knew about. Right. And kind of like you mentioned with seeing Theo and her dad, like on the night that it all went down, I also hope this is a trend that continues, where like you see a scene that you think you fully understand, and then they add like a completely new perspective to it in a future episode. Like that's just good writing, and it keeps it interesting.
Yeah.
And lets you know that maybe you shouldn't ever take anything in the show completely at face value, because there could be more to the story. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it was so they wrote it in so well that like they talked about, so Luke and his friend, which I don't remember his name, are having dinner with Steven and his wife.
Yeah. And
like the friend and Steven's wife is outside, and like Luke and Steven are talking about like withdrawal symptoms, and he's like, you get chills and just kind of shakes and all that, and Steven like genuinely seemed like he didn't know that was a thing. And then fast forward however long, 30 days, and Luke is coming down the stairs with stuff that looks like he stole, or like it's still, but he's coming down and he's just like super cold and like kind of shaking, and they mention the chills, and so it looks like Luke is definitely back on the drugs, like he's having withdrawals, but he was actually 90 days sober at the time. So that was incredible writing.
Yeah. Well, and so there's something that I'm still having a hard time making sense of from this episode, and like you kind of mentioned before, when Luke is out with his friend from rehab, that takes up most of the episode.
Yeah.
And she has been the one that helped him through his withdrawal when he first joined the program, and so he's got this really tight connection with her. But then for whatever reason, she, middle of the night, just leaves the treatment facility, and he goes off to find her, to bring her back, because he's worried that she's going to start using again, and knows that that's a bad place to be. And he goes out and he finds her, and then he's trying to get her back, but it's too late in the day for them to get into the facility that they had been in, so he's trying to find a place to stay, and it's just one thing after another, and he's trying to find money, and he's running all over. In the beginning, though, he asked her if she still had any, and it looked like she gave him drugs, and then you never see what happens to them. So I think there's like the open mystery of whether or not he did use them, but I think there's a larger thing going on where you had that flashback early of him seeing that tall ghost that floats above the floor.
Yeah.
And then every time things are like hitting rock bottom in real life, he's seeing that same, like the back of that ghost standing nearby. And that happens over and over throughout the episode. And it's like the worse things get, the closer it is to him. And so I wondered, it felt like, and he's also starting, like you mentioned, to have those withdrawal symptoms. So it almost feels like his addiction or his need or desire to use, or like his self-destructive behavior is like symbolized by that ghost. Like there's some link between them. And so then at the end, when the ghost finally is like super close to him, and then it turns around and it's his mom, and she says, "Come home, my love," and then she just disappears. Like, that was super insane, because it's almost like her telling him to go back to the house as she is personifying this thing that represents all of his self-destructive behavior. It's like, is that what happened to Nell? Was there something that pulled her back, even though obviously it was going to lead to her death? And is it now doing the same thing to him? Is this something that's going to work its way across the kids? Or so the whole episode I thought was a little dry until that moment, and then it was just like this huge, oh my god, what does this really mean? What's the significance of it? What does this say about the character of the mom? Is she actually sort of a negative influence on them? Does this go back to like what you were saying before about, is the mom the one like doing the haunting? Like, is she somehow tied up with it? Is she a negative force towards her kids? Like, I got lots of questions, obviously, but I have no answers.
Yeah, man. It was. I mean, the whole scene where, or the whole, I guess, half the episode where basically Luke is trying to find his friend was super confusing, because you're trying to figure out, like, did she actually just use him knowing that he's got all that money from his siblings, or what? I didn't catch that the drugs were rolled up in the money that she gave him in the taxi. I
thought she gave him a little plastic bag around the time when they first met. I could be wrong, though.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the $10. He's like, yeah, this should be enough to get us, but maybe anyway. That the really tall dude in the hallway that followed him was also, I mean, that was just creepy in general.
That terrified Sarah.
Yeah. Absolutely, especially like when Luke's under the bed and he comes in.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely interested to see how much his friend who ran away, if she plays any more of a role than just to make Luke look terrible. Just make it look like he, stealing and all that. I do have to say, like, I feel like Steven just straight up telling him that Neil died at the end when he looked like he was in terrible shape was just a bad judgment call.
It was, yeah.
Like, why not get him in the car first?
Yeah.
Or, somewhere safe, and then...
Although, I do think that set up a really good ending.
Yeah.
So, when Steven says it was suicide and Luke says it wasn't, after they've, kind of beat you over the head with the idea that they have the twin connection the whole episode, that's interesting. Because that means that there's more to that story as well. And it may kind of complement what happened with Theo, when she touched Nell's body. Yeah. Again, they're sort of drawing the perimeter around this another central mystery to the show, which is what exactly happened with Nell that night.
Yeah. Yep.
So good stuff.
Yeah, it was good. It's good 2 episodes. I was really happy with it. I really like the character focusing on both of them. It kind of helps tell the story that way too, because you've seen it from this perspective, and it's obviously going to be tied in to each other. But
good times.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was it. Episodes 3 and 4, both still really good. Still super excited about this series, and very excited to come back and talk about episodes 5 and 6 next week.
I agree. I think it makes it easy doing podcasts on TV shows easy if it's good.
Yes, agreed.
Like, I think if we were having to watch like a bad TV show, I was going to use the example, but then I was just going to use the example of a show I liked, and then
well, if we were doing like season 4 of American Horror Story or something, like, oh god, but anyway, And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening. There's that scene where Theo and Shirley are having lunch together, and she makes a sandwich that was just tiny, and then she cuts it in half, and they each eat half of that tiny sandwich for lunch. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that is such... Like, I've noticed that a lot of times with sisters, it's like... And when I say this, I mainly mean Sarah and her sister. So really, there's one example of this that I'm thinking of. And I'm generalizing to an entire gender. But it's like girls try to see who can eat the least. And I don't understand why. And it's like I'm so full from this half of a sandwich. You know that they both just like downed a can of Pringles as soon as they were apart from each other after that. Like that's not sustainable. Like I just don't understand it. It's silly to me. Just make each other a sandwich. Life, because you know they're both hangry too. Mm-hmm. Like that was probably a lot of the subtext of anyway.
Yeah.
Moral of the story: eat enough to be healthy. Do what you need to do. I support you. All right, episode 4.
I'll say this.
Oh.
I don't support that statement. Okay? I want you people to be as unhealthy as possible. I want you to
You want
not
them to eat
healthy.
too much.
You could do whatever you want, and I don't care. Like, it's not that I don't care about you. I just don't care. It's freedom.
Well,
I'm for freedom. I want anarchy. I'm for it. If you want a quarter of a sandwich, you eat a quarter of a sandwich. Just don't come bitching at me about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. Well, but like, if you...
I think your experience may have come from dealing with hangry people.
Yeah, no, it 100%
so you're just
has.
like, eat a damn sandwich.
Exactly. Just get full and quit taking it out on me.
Yeah.
You have an entire refrigerator full of food right there.
Yeah, I definitely know that I've been one of those people for sure. So it's...
on a band trip.
I apologize for sure.
Yeah. So...